Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Talking About the Big Stuff podcast with Michael Cole and Matthew Krevat. I am Michael Cole.
And I am Matthew Krevat.
No. we were just we were just commenting on how Madhavi's got much better audio than you do, and you go get potato chips.
She's using my old external camera microphone that you guys were like, that sucks, you need something better. And I got an external mic that's supposed to be better. And she's using my old equipment that you told me.
I am using the old thing, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
I guess that's true, too.
Okay, let's get started. So, welcome back. Sorry, I had a Snickers and I had like a piece of peanut.
You're not yourself when you haven't had a Snickers.
It's true. I told Sarah the other day, I'm like, if Logan's Halloween candy's still in the pantry, it is up for grabs now. There is no more like, can I have this one, Logan? And she's like, I haven't been doing that the whole time. And I'm like, oh, it's 6 months later. I'm just eating what I want to eat now.
That was a conversation on Dear Old Dads last week.
Oh, was
like,
it?
Is there food in your house that's someone's food that you have to ask before you eat it? Or once it's in the house, is it everybody's food?
With his Halloween candy, I'm always semi-respectful of that.
Do you have a Halloween tax?
But he gives me whatever he doesn't like, and a lot of times that's exactly what I want. So
when I was a kid, my dad would expect a certain amount of milk, just straight plain milk chocolate. Like if you had just Hershey or Nestle's milk chocolate, right off the top, those went to him. He didn't care about nuts and caramel or anything like that, or crunches, but regular chocolate, Kisses, stuff like that, straight to dad. Which is fine because I'm not a milk chocolate person anyway. So,
Alex asked if I eat Snickers upside down, and I'm assuming that is a milk, like the vein that didn't look good. The vein that goes down the center. I'm assuming that's what it was. Anyway, we need to get moving because I have I have to be at the airport at 7 a.m.
We'll be done recording by that time.
Yeah, we fucking better be. I haven't packed yet. All right, so tonight's episode.
Are we streaming? Are we moving or grooving?
Oh yeah, we were doing that while you were off in the corner doing whatever it was you were doing.
Fixing electronics for other things. I got many responsibilities.
Sure. Anyway, so tonight's episode, we've never had a so anyways to the intro of the episode, so congratulations. So anyways, tonight's episode is going to be about the sex talk with our children. And we have Madhavi back on as a guest. In case you missed the last week's episode, we're recording them both tonight because I'll be in Florida next Monday. Which also means we will not be live streaming next Monday. So we're going to be talking about sex. So
talking about you and me, talking about birds and bees.
Yep. And so I'm assuming that you've both already done the talk with your children. And I
would hope so, because they're 27, 26, and 22. They don't know by now.
I was raised Catholic, so I have yet to receive it. So, no, my parents. So, Logan's in third grade. In third grade is when I received what I received, which was not the talk. But so I remember two things that made me come home, and I have not been able to tell Logan these stories yet because he doesn't know enough yet to tell him these stories. But I keep asking him. I keep saying like, does anybody talk about sex at school? Like, is there anything coming up? And we've had the initial talk. He knows that sex is how babies are made. He understands that babies come out of the vagina. He does not know much else detail-wise about than that. So we're waiting until his 9th birthday, which is in 3 weeks, and then we'll, not on his birthday, but we'll start talking the next level at that point. Unless something comes up earlier. But I keep just doing little check-ins, and I asked because in third grade, two things happened. One was a kid called me a homo. And I went home and I said, Mom, what is a homo? And she said, that's a boy that likes other boys. I'm like, then I'm a homo. And she was like, no, like wants to kiss other boys. I'm like, oh, then I'm not a homo. and then I was a very innocent. You believe it or
I
not,
don't really
I was
want to kiss a girl at that age either, so I don't know what's going
no,
on.
I definitely wanted to kiss girls already at that age,
Me
but
too.
but I was
in
pretty
kindergarten.
innocent beyond kissing. And then the
I
other
was-
thing, you were fisting in third grade.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, first grade, third grade.
Yeah, well, your fists
Third
are
grade, I
longer
was
in
using a
first grade.
foot.
Anyway, so in third grade,
Hope you're still watching, Sam.
in case my sister listens, who's also Sam, he's not talking to you.
Yes, I am.
Anyway, my sister's never listened to this podcast. I'm almost positive. Anyway, so in third grade, a kid came in and he said, I found a video that my dad has, and a guy got his penis stuck in a girl's vagina. And I'm like, why would he do that? Why would he put it in there? And
Aww.
me and 3 or 4 other kids were,
What is he, a dog?
we were just like, what? Like, why on earth? What would possess this man to do something so stupid and weird? And we couldn't understand. And I don't remember this, but I must have gone home and mentioned it to my parents, because within days, my mom had gone to the public library and got a video called What Kids Need to Know About Sex. And it was like,
What to do if your dick gets stuck in a vagina?
no, it was What Kids Need to Do About Sex. And I don't remember all the detail. I remember that there was like some live, it's very 80s. And there's some live, because this was 93, so it was probably 5 to 10 years old already. And it was very 80s in production style, but there's also cartoons of like, you're going to notice some changes. For women, you're going to get, your breasts are going to grow. For men, you're going to grow some hair and your testicles are going to descend. And that's literally all I remember about this video. My mom has reminded me in the years since that it was fairly comprehensive, and my mom and my dad sat there, watched it with us. Afterwards, they said, do you have any questions for us? And we said, my sister and I went, no. And then my dad went to bed, and we were like, what is this? What is this? As soon as my dad went to bed, we had a dozen questions. But I don't remember the video having the comprehensive stuff. But so that's, that was all at Logan's age. So now I'm like, I don't want him to learn.
Next time I come over, I'm going to tell him that my penis got stuck in my wife's vagina, and then he can go and ask you, what do you do about that situation?
I think that when we have the talk, he's going to have a better idea than we think.
I think you should show him the Monty Python clip.
I don't know. I know some Monty Python. I don't
There's
know exactly
a clip
what you're
where it's John Cleese is like the professor, at a kid's school, like they're 13, 14, whatever, and he's going, okay, time for you to learn about sex, and his wife comes in to demo, and he pulls his pants down. He goes, first you mount the one. He goes, normally there'll be foreplay, but let's assume the foreplay's happened, and so like, our favorite line was always like, how do you warm a woman up for sex? And one of the kids is like, like ignoring herself, and you're like, pay attention. And he's like, massage the clitoris. And he's like, do not stampede towards the clitoris. Warm her up first.
Yeah, I don't think that Sarah would be even. I don't think Sarah's even going to want the word clitoris mentioned that first go round. And you and I have talked about it before. The sex talk is many talks. Or a series of talks at least. And so we'll be, this will be our second talk, but I am curious as to how you both approached it. I'm assuming did you do it together? Did you split it?
With Leah while the boys were young and needed to then understand what happened.
Okay.
Yeah. I was pregnant, and so Matthew and I both, but Matthew did most of the talking and like basically laid it out. I don't remember exactly what you said, but I remember.
Well, they were asking how the baby got into mommy, first of all, so that because what every expert will tell you, or almost every expert will tell you, the wait for them to come to you. They have a question, answer the question, give them the amount of information they need to be satisfied, and that's the end of the conversation. And when they need more, they'll ask for more.
Okay.
They were Jacob 4 and 5.
Is very, very inquisitive, though. Like Jacob is not given up without knowing everything.
Yeah. He doesn't like to miss out on anything. Since he was a baby, like he never slept, because he didn't want to miss out on anything. He hasn't changed. So.
Yeah.
But no, I will tell you just as a general, I always wanted to be completely honest with my kids because my parents told me nothing. Indian parents. I don't know why that is a thing, but I got no
Maybe
sex talk. I
was
got
different
nothing.
generation.
I got nothing. I got nothing. The first time my mom mentioned anything was when I was getting married, and she said, "I assume you don't need to know anything." And I said, "Nope, I'm good." And I didn't even know about my period. So I was 11 when my
Until we got
period
married.
started. No, but I was 11 and I didn't know what was going on. I was terrified. My sister had to explain everything to me. My mother was at work. I started my period. My sister had to do everything for me, which I'm grateful for, but I was freaking terrified. I had no idea what was happening. And to this day, I'm still pissed off at my parents for not saying anything. So in general, I was always going to be honest with my kids. Okay. Yeah. You know,
that's been the approach I've taken. I mean, Logan doesn't ask questions. The little bit that it's come up, even a little bit with us, we're like, we always ask him, like, do you want to know more? Do you have any questions? And he's like, no. We're like, do you want to stop talking about this? He goes, yes.
Yes.
He does not want to talk about it. And we've told him, like, that's fine for right now, but eventually we're going to have this conversation. And it's also a weird age for him specifically because he's got friends who are on, you know, wildly different ends of the sibling range. So he has a friend who's one of his best friends is the same age as him, and his older sister is about to be an adult. She's 18 or about to turn 18.
Oh, okay.
And then he's got another friend, one of his other best friends, who's the same age as him, who just had a baby brother in the last 6 months. And so, like, they've got to be getting wildly different information, I would think, based on just like the surroundings. And so, kids talk, and we ask Logan, you know, like, it's not a problem. We're never gonna have a. Sorry, I'm getting an alert.
I moved my computer and it doesn't like that.
Okay, that's fine. We why isn't it letting me close the window though?
You gotta learn more.
Well, I can't see Madhavi. Oh, yep, okay. Anyway, so you know, we've told him, we're like, none of this is like you're going to get in trouble. Like, you could tell us whatever, you can ask whatever, you know. So and we've had little bits and pieces of like, you say that, and we don't want you saying that because that's a sex thing that you don't understand yet. And that's when we first had the first little sex talk. Well, a few years ago, because Sarah had a C-section to have him, and she had some major complications. So, like, years and years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, he said something about he was glad he's a boy because he never has to have surgery. And we're like, what does that mean? And he goes, well, mummies have to have surgery when they're having babies. And we're like, not all, mom. Like,
just your mom.
Just your mom. And I was born a C-section. I'm like, so we have a lot in our family.
So is Jacob.
Yeah. So I'm like, so it isn't uncommon, but it's not the only way. And we're like, do you understand, you know, where the baby comes from? And he was like, I don't know. And we were like, well, the baby comes out of the woman's vagina.
He goes, yeah, Dad, I was talking about physiognomies.
Yeah. And he goes, oh, that's actually way better than I thought. And we were like, what did you think? And he goes, oh, I thought that they came out of the butthole. And I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. If you think it's in the stomach, like, that makes sense. But that was the first talk. Then the second talk was, he was saying humping or something a year or so ago. And we were like, don't do, you know, because one of his friends was humping something. And he was like, he's humping it, Dad. And I'm like, no, we're not saying that.
He's humping it, Dad.
And I don't like when you do that voice because I know what that voice means.
That's how I hear Logan when Logan.
Sure.
Hey, Dad, he's humping it. Boo ba da boo ba da boo.
So yeah. So we're
two dogs. I could take turns humping.
Yeah. So the we don't have that much, you know. So we've had those two talks. 3 or 4 weeks ago, drugs came up for some reason, and we were talking about drugs. And I don't want him to think marijuana is a drug the way, like, I think we're indoctrinated to think marijuana is like cocaine or heroin. And I think marijuana is more like alcohol or cigarettes, or arguably better than alcohol or cigarettes. So I was trying to explain to him, like, I don't want to raise you with that, like, inherent, like, you know, like taboo filter on it. And he asked if I had ever done marijuana, and I was like, yes. And he goes, when was the last time? And I'm like, I don't think that it's appropriate for me to tell you all the details.
What time is it, Logan?
And I, after this conversation, no. And then I said to him, I don't think it's appropriate for me to give you that much detail. And he was like, kind of not understanding. And I said, there's a lot of things. I said, I always explain to you context that, you know, like I said, it's appropriate for you to, you know, pooping is not inappropriate. Going in the middle of someone's dining room table and pooping on the table is inappropriate. Context matters.
Yeah, one thing I said was there are some things that are private.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it, but it's private.
Right. And so then I said, you know, as far as me having tried marijuana, you know that I have. You don't need to know all the details. Just like you know that babies are made from sex, so you know every mom and dad has had sex, but you don't need to know how often, when it's happening. You don't need to know
which
all those
guests visiting.
In what position?
Yeah.
So the only thing I really remember clearly about our sex talk really was kind of towards the end, us saying it, and it's something that people do, you know, just because they enjoy doing it together. You know, people, it's not just to make babies.
Yeah.
And at one point, it may not have been that first conversation, it may have been a later one when they were older. But I remember them saying, so when you close the door to your room and you won't answer it even when we're knocking, I went, yep.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, we need to know we're done. Conversation's over.
Yeah, conversation over. We're done.
We're going to talk a little bit about patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. For $10, you can know what joke I just made that if you're listening to this on audio, you didn't hear.
If you're watching it, on video, you didn't hear it either.
If you're watching live, you're like, oh, I should pay $10 a month to hear the stuff Matthew says that I only get to see if it's in a live stream or for $10. And that's one of them. And that's the truth.
You're obsessed with fisting.
It's Cringer's fault.
Anyway, so I forget where we got off topic.
We were talking about when do you tell your kid about fisting?
Yeah. And
you were saying that your parents fist on Saturday mornings when you're on vacation, and they won't let you in the room until they're done.
An edible?
Edible?
Oh, I thought you said edible. I'm like, we doing a podcast about edibles? Sure.
Alex wants more, he said.
I almost think we should do, once a year, we should do an intoxicated podcast. Anyway, well, it's been more than a year since we did the first one, though. Yeah, so you really derailed me. I'm sorry. My darkest shame.
So I was saying that my children were very upset when they found out that that's the reason we closed the door. But that's why we explained that there's nothing embarrassing about it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's private.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't talk about what we do and whom we do it with.
Yep. Yeah. Oh, I also accidentally told Logan about thruples last week.
Okay.
I didn't tell him any detail, so he is really big into riddles.
It's over. He's going to be confused.
He's big into riddles, and there's this riddle that he had like a couple years ago that resurfaced, but it was a slightly different variation on it. So it was this is a crazy one to be telling the night before I fly somewhere, but if you're on a plane and it crashes and all the single people die but there's 7 people still alive, how are they still alive? And I said, couples and thruples. And he goes, what is a thruple? Because it's 7. It couldn't be all couples, which was the original joke.
Mm-hmm.
It was like 8 people live. How could it be? And it's couples. Because there's, all the single people died. Every single person.
Oh, the single people? Oh, the single people.
So I say that, and he's like, what's a thruple? And I was like, it's just It's just when it's like instead of 2 people being in a relationship, it's 3 people being in a relationship. So that was a PG version of a throuple.
Mm-hmm.
And since some people have thruples for parents, I think that that's appropriate. So anyway.
I think there was this Katy Perry song that talks about a threesome or something, and Leah and her friend would like asked, and I not separately, like to each to like Leah asked me,
It's
and
not like
her friend asked her mom.
Madhavi asking. They each asked their own mom.
Yeah. So the friend's mom, I think she gave her a very PG version of it. Just like, oh, I don't even know if she said there are 3 people. I think I don't know what she said, but it wasn't enough because I told Leah exactly what it was. And so
when one girl sits on the face and one girl sits on.
I had to, but I had to say,
kiss.
I said, don't tell your friends because I don't know what their parents are telling them. So you guys have to keep it to yourself. You can't go and tell your friend. I mean, like,
and our kids had that for a lot of things. As atheists, we got to tell our kids, like, don't tell them Santa's not real. Don't tell them Jesus is not real. So they were used to not being able to share everything we tell them with their friends, and knowing they got a different conversation.
This one time,
well, we have the same thing within my family. We say, Logan, don't tell everybody in the family that trickle down economics isn't real.
You're a relative freak.
Yeah. Now, there was only one time that it was a problem because they had a classmate who had a really bad brain tumor and he was dying. And I told my kids, I'm like, he might die, and it's a really bad tumor.
Spend as much time with him as you can, and play with him as much as you can, because he has limited time.
Yeah, and and be nice to him because he's going through a lot and everything. And he wasn't always in school, but when he was in school, he was in Leah's class, and I said, just be really nice to him, but know that it's going to be sad because he might die, and it's a very good chance, unfortunately, because he has this terrible cancer. Well, her friend next door,
she repeated it to her friends. We need to be nice to him because of this.
And so her mom got upset and said, "Well, I told her to pray for, that she should pray for him." And I'm like, "Sorry, I'm sorry." And then he died, right? And we all went to the wake, and Leah said, "Can I go? I want to see his mom." She was the only kid. She wasn't the only kid there, but she was the only kid that walked right up to his mother and said, "I'm so sorry. I really liked Cameron. He was a good friend, and I'm really sorry," and gave her a hug and the whole thing. She was the only kid that did that. Every other kid was sitting around awkwardly and not being able to talk about it and stuff. Not my daughter. My daughter went right to the mom and gave her sympathy because I told her the truth. There was no surprise there. And we do the same thing with the sex talks. There's no surprise. You have to tell them everything. I mean, because one thing is like, I know kids who are like angry because they find out Santa Claus is not real. My parents lied to me my whole life. How awful is that? They lied to me. I don't want my kids saying that we lied to them,
Yeah, so we make sure they never find out our lies.
Nice. I think that one of the reasons to have that same mentality, especially with the sex talk, is, and this, to the people who don't want to have the sex talk at all, I think that's a really big missed opportunity, because it's a good way of, I don't want to say controlling the narrative, but to some extent, like, if we don't have the discussion with our children, they're going to learn from other kids who are, we've all played telephone. We know that that's not good. Or they're going to learn from pornography. And pornography can be a very nice thing, but it can also be a very scary thing. But it's almost never a good teaching tool unless it's...
No plumber comes in 20 minutes. That's ridiculous.
But you know what I'm saying? Like we don't.
When I was
even the best
15, I was camping. I mean, not like real camping, but there was this empty lot in the Poconos. There was an area that wasn't developed, and we'd go out there, that section of the neighborhood, and we kind of put up tents. And a couple of us were around the fire, and Thomas was visiting. He was from Texas, and he used to live in the house next to mine. And he was up visiting his family. Was visiting my family, so we went out with my friends and we were camping. And we're talking about sex stuff because we're 13, and that's what you do. And he talks about how
You say,
have
"Oh, you got your penis stuck in a vagina."
yeah.
Yeah.
Like we're talking as if we had done stuff because that's what you do, right? And he goes, "You use a rubber, right? Because if you don't use a rubber, the baby will die." And and he's a religious kid from Texas, and there's a Catholic kid with us, and he's nodding along. And like I look over at the other Jewish kid, and we're like, "Did you hear what he said? Like he's got to do." Do we have to correct him? We have this exchange, looking at each other like, "What do we? What's our responsibility here?" Because we know he's got it backwards.
Yeah.
But like, obviously, his parents haven't had the same conversations as our parents have had.
Yeah.
Where for Jews, it's not such a heavy topic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always found that interesting that because so many people who don't want sex ed and don't want to have the discussion of in any reasonable way. It's like, well, you guys are the ones who want to control what your kids learn. This is
You don't want them to learn it at school, and you don't want to teach it to them at home.
they're going to learn it the worst ways possible, which
Yep.
either whether it's intentionally worse, pornography can be very I don't want Logan watching the kind of porn I watch, learning from the kind of porn I watch, or learning from other 10, 12-year-old boys,
And then tell them they can't have abortions after they get pregnant because you didn't tell them how not to get pregnant.
Yeah. And you don't, and there's a I'm going to link to her in the show notes and stuff, but there's a sex educator that I follow on Instagram. I asked her to come on the show like a year ago, and she said she doesn't do podcasts. She's way out of our league. That's why she said no politely. But I watch a lot of little things that she sets up about the appropriate ages to be having different talks. And she said that sometimes when she has to talk to a parent who doesn't want to have the sex talk when their kid is 8 or 9, she says, well, it's a good way of helping protect them against sexual abuse. Because if you have the talk with them, they understand how to what's appropriate, what's inappropriate.
You haven't told them, right?
And there's all and how to respond if something inappropriate happens, and then sometimes parents still are like, well, I understand that, but I still don't want to have the discussion. And she's like, that is really suspicious. If you can understand, she shows them stats and stuff, and she's like, if you can see this and you're still not willing to willing to do this, because
that's a cognitive dissonance thing. The pain of me going through the conversation, I just want to pretend my kid probably won't be sexually harassed, but I will definitely be in pain if I have to tell them don't get sexually harassed. So I'll just cross my fingers.
Well, and unfortunately, there's a lot of parents. I don't know about a lot, but their parents who sexually abuse their children, and so how do those parents don't want to have the discussion. And that's what her point was, is that she's suspicious of someone who's like, well, I see all the stats and I'm not going to do it anyway. Because that's well, if you're not going to do it to protect your kid, is there another reason why? Or is it because there is no, I think for most of us, there's no level of discomfort we wouldn't go through for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think
discomfort
there is a level of people convince themselves, my kid is not in a position where they need to know. They're not getting sexually assaulted by anyone in the family or anyone. The stats, the same as owning a gun, right? Every gun owner says, my kid's not going to be the one that finds the gun unsecured and shoots themselves. There's no parent who said, one day my kid's going to shoot themselves. And yet kids get shot. So clearly people who think it's not going to happen. And so I think that's the same thing. People say, it's not going to happen to my kid. I'm embarrassed by sex, and sex is a bad thing that I'm a naughty, naughty boy for doing. I can't tell my kids about it. I mean, that's where it comes from. Blame their parents and their grandparents for not doing it, passing it down from the beginning.
Yeah. Yeah, and I get that, but I also think to some, I look at my parents. My parents, like I said, I don't remember that video.
When do you look at them, Mike?
Anyway, I don't know. I'm going to choose my words extremely careful. When I think about my parents in that situation, I think about the fact that they weren't raised probably with they probably weren't raised much differently, so they probably didn't get the sex talk with any meaning in any meaningful way. So to an extent, it's a matter of someone has to break the cycle, and breaking the cycle, I don't necessarily blame someone for not breaking the cycle, especially I'm old enough that I think that there was it was still fairly taboo to some extent. The idea of like talking about sex with kids even when I was a kid. It is less and less so. So like for my generation, if you're a parent now and you're my age roughly, or even younger in some cases, because I became a parent relatively old, like you don't have the same excuses to just repeat the same mistakes. Same thing, we've talked about spanking before. My parents spanked, and I don't think that that's a good thing, but I also think that that was a thing of the times. Like my dad has said on multiple occasions, if he could do it over again, he wouldn't do that because we know more, and as a society. So like I think this is the same situation of like we know more. It's now time to break the cycle, And when I hear someone say like, "Oh, I throw the sandal at my kid," or "I do this with my kid," and I'm like, but we know that like I get that your parents did it. Your parents did not know. Your parents did not understand statistics. You do. You have the information here. We have, the internet. They didn't have when I was having the sex talk. There wasn't easily you couldn't Google. My mom had to drive to the library, find a video. That I don't know how long that took, but it wasn't just like, how do I have the sex talk and I'm done. Like I've figured it out on Google. So
a YouTube video, they have to actually buy a video for you.
Yeah. I'm going to see if I can find what kids need to know about sex. I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere. I'll find it and I'll link it in the show notes because I remember it being very goofy and very 80s.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had books. Like there were books we had.
Well, for Leah, there was a whole American Girl series, and it was called "The Care and Keeping of You," and it talked about everything. It talked about the body, and it talked about, girls starting their period, and it's talked about, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, and so we went through all those books together, she and I started at like really getting into depth, like at 8 or 9, and only because I had started my period so young. I was 11, and usually kids are like 12, 13, whatever. But I was like on the early side of 11.
And now I think 11 is probably pretty common. It's gotten younger.
Yeah, but it wasn't back then. But so I was one of the first to start in my class, and I was younger than everybody because I had skipped a grade. So I was still younger than everybody. But so we started at like 8 or 9. We bought the entire series. It's a wonderful series. It really is. It lays out things so well, and I just loved it. And I bought every book, and we read it together, and she would read it sometimes, and then and I had already read it, and then she'd ask me questions, and we talked about everything. And to this day, we talk about everything.
Yeah.
We don't hold back. Like I don't, I mean, like when she had, she's gonna get mad at me for saying this, but when she got her boyfriend, and it was like her first like adult kind of relationship, we went out and bought condoms, I was like, here, you need to keep these just in case something happens. You need, and I'm like, it's not the boy's responsibility. It's both of your responsibility, but you should have.
You pay the price if something goes wrong.
Yeah. So I said, well, I personally think it is your responsibility. It's the girls. The girl she's the one that can get pregnant. You need to, you need to carry these condoms with you. So I have been upfront with her from, very young.
Yeah. I will say, I don't remember in this video, which I did just link in the chat, but I'll put in the show notes too. I don't remember if they talked about condoms or protection at all. Mm-hmm.
Video probably didn't. Your parents got you the Catholic version.
I don't know. No, but I knew what condoms were.
But baby
growing up, but I don't. But nobody. It was never impressed upon me to use them because it was wait till marriage. You don't need condoms. You need to wait till marriage.
We were pre-HIV, so for us it was purely, oh, but she could be on the pill. There were other things, but because we were for other venereal diseases, we didn't talk so much about condoms protecting diseases until it was talking about the big stuff.
Yeah, but yeah, and I mean, I was born in '84, and so by the time I was 10 years old, I knew AIDS jokes, like very cruel AIDS jokes before I knew what sex was. So like I knew about AIDS. But like I didn't, it was never impressed upon me. Like it was genuine. It was everyone was like, well, you wait till marriage. you won't get AIDS, you won't get pregnant if you wait till marriage. And obviously, you know, I definitely used condoms the first time, but I didn't use them every time for like, I mean, obviously I'm married and it's different now, but like, and we've been trying for 4 years, but like when I was single, when I was, you know, between the ages of 19 when I became sexually
Buy her
active.
flowers or something. You shouldn't have to try so hard to have sex with your wife.
Yeah.
Be nice.
Between the ages of 19 and 26 when I met Sarah, those were my sexually active pre-Sarah years. I wasn't using a condom every time because, you know, like it was like, basically it was like, if she asks me to, I'm gonna. If she doesn't ask me to, I'm not gonna. My big Now, Alex just said, "What a gentleman." I will say, one of my first pieces, I had a friend who was about a year behind me in high school, and one time he said, you know, he knew I was already having sex, and he's like, "What can you give me for advice about having sex? I've been with my girlfriend for almost a year. I think we're gonna have sex." And I said, "Here's my advice: don't don't have sex without a condom until you're ready to never have sex with a condom again." Because I had already had sex without a condom, and I was like, it's so much better. So like, don't try it until you're ready to never use a condom again. And I stand by that advice for sure. But,
I think once you get to the point where you're not worried about disease, like you're in a long-term monogamous relationship, like then it's just pregnancy you worry about. You can upgrade to lambskin, so at least it's not latex where you literally feel nothing.
Yeah, and it's got that weird smell. Anyway, I'm pro condom. I know it doesn't sound like it. I am pro condom. Just not for
The
me.
best thing in the world is getting your vasectomy and being like, no more condoms for me.
Yes.
No more condoms for me.
Well, or finding out that you may be like borderline sterile, and
Yeah, but borderline is still borderline.
we want a baby, so
we did a lot of fertility treatments to get the boys, and then
just the one boy. The second boy came along just fine.
Right, but it was the same. But it was because of the same treatments. You were still in rhythm from all the years of treatments to get Jacob. You were just still.
But then with Leah, it was like 4 years later. We hadn't used any protection or anything. We were just, you know,
borderline sterile. But then that borderline, we crossed that line one time.
and then we were like in the process of like adopting, and I got pregnant.
Oh yeah.
Well, we were looking through when I was working at GSK at the time, and they had a very generous benefit that if you were adopting, they would reimburse you what the average cost of the medical coverage for having a baby was, so that you were getting the same level of support whether you gave birth to a baby or adopted a baby. The company paid the same amount of money to help you along. That's so great. We were going through classes there on how to get an adoption agency aligned with them, because there was one that we had heard about through friends that would find mixed orphans in India that are part Caucasian and part Indian. Oh, that Caucasian's a bad thing to say, because Northern Indians are Caucasian, even if they're brown skin. But you know what I mean. But they would look at pictures of you personally, and we knew a family where their biological kids did not look as much like the parents as the adopted kids did, because they literally went with pictures and go, that one looks like it could be these two kids. So that they find a baby that looks like the two people.
Yeah, because I wanted a girl, and so we were going to adopt a girl, and then I got pregnant with Leah. So, but I told them, I said, if this one's a boy, we're still adopting a girl.
Three's too many. A couple weeks ago, I said that to Matthew.
You play in the zone. There's no more man-to-man coverage. You have to play the zone once you have three.
Yeah. Well, they say now, obviously, yours are all adults, but they say now that 3 children financially is the equivalent to like 10 children in 1980, which is crazy. That's just
well, funny. Even we used to talk about when they say save up for college. It's like daycare costs as much as college did at that time.
Like
maybe
crazy.
Now college has gone crazy. But our kids, I mean, luckily, we had the privilege of grandparents who had some money, and they had put away those 529 accounts, like special accounts that are saving money for kids. Yeah. And then our kids went to state schools. They weren't really that expensive, more expensive than when we went, but not like crazy expensive. And they were able to cover it with those accounts. Like that was, the money that our parents had put away for our kids was enough to pay for college.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it sounds like I was going to say, because we've been Madhavi, you said that you even had you were even like you still talk to her about it fairly regularly.
Oh yeah, we
and
still talk.
that's what I want, is like it to be pretty much consistent, that he can come to, like, I want him to feel comfortable coming to either of us. Although I do realize that typically a kid's more comfortable with one parent than the other when it comes to these things, and a lot of times that's the parent of the same sex or gender. Although the first time we talked about it with him, we're like, you can come to us with anything you want, or just one of us if you have a question that maybe you're like a little you just would feel more comfortable asking one of us. And he goes, okay, if I have those, I'll ask mom. And she was like,
Oh,
and she was like, or you could ask dad. And he goes, why would I ask dad? But I think in the last year that's shifted. I think he's kind of like, I think he would not want to ask Sarah.
Yeah, I have no idea if the boys have gone to Matthew with questions or whatever, because Leah always comes to me, and occasionally the boys have come to me, but I think they've mostly gone to Matthew for. Have they, honey? I don't know if they.
not in a long time when they were young.
Well, I mean, when they were younger, yeah. I don't think
They not on sex as much as biology,
yes.
body changes and such.
Yeah. I think that is what I'm expecting too, is like, because Logan knows about puberty, but other than like hair and I don't know that he knows what an erection is. Like, you know what I mean? Yet we'll have that conversation soon. But like, if he were to get one, which I've heard from some people that they started very young. I was almost 12, or I should say, I was 12 when I figured out what to do with it. But I don't. But I was fairly an old developmentally in that way. So I do kind of like, I'm not sure if he'll come to us about it, but we'll talk to him. But I one thing that I also think is interesting with you two, because I think that you're a good example of what I want to be, and the fact that like if we have a daughter after Logan, I don't want to be different rules. I understand that there are differences, but I don't want different rules. In different ways. I don't want to be if I had a daughter, I don't want to be like, well, go to your mother, like, and you two, I would be very surprised if either of you was like that. Not to say, I mean, if it's like, if my daughter comes to me and says, how do I put in a tampon? I'm like, let's go ask your mother.
Yeah.
But if she just comes up to me and was like, Dad, I heard this thing, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Or if Logan goes to Sarah and is like, Mom, I don't want them to feel like, and to some extent, I feel like my parents did a pretty good job. I don't think my sister and I had wildly different rules based on gender. I think she was treated differently because she was the baby, but like not.
She was a better person.
I don't know about that.
Do you though?
I think she voted for no. I don't think she voted for Trump, but no. So I was raised with like a fairly good example of it, but I think you two are probably a great example of that.
I had weird conversation with people when they'd say, Leah's so pretty, you may keep the boys away from her. I'm like, it's her body. I have no say in it.
Yeah.
And they were like, how can you even say that? I'm like, it's a fact. I mean, she can sneak out and do whatever she wants. How am I going to stop her? The best I can do is be a supportive parent that lets her make good decisions, but they're her decisions, especially we're in North Carolina. Age of consent is 16. Once she's 16, I have no legal right to stop her from doing what she wants to do, let alone moral or ethical.
Well, the other thing is, if you do have a daughter, like when Leah started her period, the boys already knew, so it wasn't, we didn't separate like, here's what the boys need to know, here's what the girls need to know. Everybody knew everything, you know?
I mean, they were in high school, like they're the girls in their school were carrying.
Yeah. But I mean, like I would tell them, I told them about me having a period so that when Leah started hers, they would be, more aware and stuff. I remember every time she had her period, they were so sweet to her. They'd bring her stuff and they'd, sit and talk to. I mean, like they were just, which I wanted that for her as a sister, but I also for their wives, I wanted them to be compassionate and understanding and, you know, all of that. So you got to be truthful about everything, but tell both of, you know, the boys and the girls everything, because, you know, you want to understand the other person, you know. And again, my parents told me nothing. And so I, you know, I just try to, I'm totally counteracting that, you know.
I got a really weird combo because my parents were very abstinence, like, you know, conservative, but they also, like, my dad was raised by a single mother with only sisters. So, like, my dad, like, when I say he treated my sister and I the same, it was not only was Sam to be treated in a certain way, I was to treat women in the exact standard that he wanted her to be treated, which I think is fairly atypical for especially conservative men. It's usually like, go sow your seeds, and you are going to be a virgin till the day you're wed, and maybe even not then. And, you know, and then so he was like pretty consistent in the conservatism, and then also though, like, I like, unlike a lot of that toxic masculinity of like, I'm not getting my wife or my daughter pads. Like, I don't remember, but I can't imagine my dad would ever have behaved like that. He might have been like, there's too many options and I don't know what the hell I'm doing. That is very possible. But he would never have, if she had been like Tampax Pearl, you know, whatever, mid-flow, whatever, he would have been like, okay, my dad's, and I don't use this term loosely, he's actually OCD. So he would have gotten the exact thing as long as she described it properly.
Yeah.
Madhavi told me she wanted the pads with wings. So I went out, I got her a box of the cheapest pads they had, because, you know, bargain shopper. I got her buffalo wings.
Yeah.
No, we were just, if like Matthew was going shopping and we needed, you know, we would just, I told him exactly what I wanted, you know, or I'd send him a picture or something so that he knew exactly what to get.
Yeah. I was at a CVS in Durham like 5 or 6 years ago, and Sarah was in the car, Logan was asleep, he was little, and she asked me to run in to get her tampons, and she told me very specifically, because if you don't tell me specifically, I will get the wrong thing. Not just tampons, any product.
Because you can't picture it in your head. So
I cannot. So I'll be like, you said coffee, and I got coffee.
You know, just coffee, ice cream, Michael.
Like, so I ran in to get it, and the woman, who couldn't have been much more than like 5 years older than me, if that, was like, "Oh, is it your daughter's first? You're a proud papa, huh?" And I was like, "It's my wife."
For my wife.
For my wife. And she's like, "Oh, we just don't see many husbands. The only time we see men in here are for especially, like, I am old enough that I could have a teenage daughter, and I could have had a teenage daughter 5 years ago, whatever it was. But I'm not like so old that you wouldn't assume that, like, I don't know, like my wife still gets periods. Like, I'm not, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I can't remember. You might even know, Mike, because you tend to know these things better than I. There's a stand-up comic, probably in the late 80s, who had a routine about that. How I don't understand how men, conservative men, are embarrassed about going to buy women's products like tampons, you know, in a store. Like, they're afraid that someone will go, "Look, this guy's buying it." I walk in the store and go, "Look at this. I have a woman and she bleeds. She's my woman. You know, I'm proud to buy tampons in the store."
I don't remember. I don't know that I've heard that, but I feel the same way. I also feel like, you know, I would, especially when I was, you know, prior to trying to have kids, if Sarah had asked me, or any other girlfriend had asked me to go get tampons, I'd be like, "Hey, that means we're not having a baby I don't want yet." You know, like I don't see the period as a bad thing. Like, period's only a bad thing when you don't want it.
So I said, Madhavi and I need to go to fertility doctors, Jacob. And when we started going, I was so mad, because like all the times that we were like, that we thought maybe she was pregnant, that we didn't want to be pregnant, all the stress, all the things like, "Oh my God, we slipped up, we didn't wear a condom." Like, all that was for nothing. Like, we had to get medical treatments to get pregnant. If I had only known. Like, you should get fertility tests when you start dating to see if you need to wear condoms.
It can change, though.
It
can
can
change.
change,
I would say
yeah.
with Leah,
Because
it's like 5 years of
I
crying
actually
before
think
that.
me being on the pill messed me up a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I had other problems, yeah, but I think some of it was being on the pill for so long, you know.
It can change for the guy too, because
Yeah.
I've successfully had 3 pregnancies in my life, or contributed to 3 pregnancies in my life.
It's like, you look pretty good, Mike.
Thank you. And but I'm the problem right now. Like my doctor was like told me some things that I had going on medically, and I googled, can these affect your fertility as a man? And every single one of them was a yes. And so it's like I am the problem. Like if there's a problem, it could just be like a lack of good timing.
And one of our YouTube live watchers just texted me that Rich Schneider, ultra-conservative comedian, was the one who was proud that he was buying tampons. So there's probably a very fictional story coming from him.
Yeah.
It was his inspirational story. I wish I had a woman I could buy a tampon.
I'm looking him up because... yeah. But yeah,
wait. Unless Mikey meant, I'm sorry. I never mind. He's not conservative. Rich Schneider, Canyon Man. That's who he means. I think that he was a very good comedian. I got him confused with Rob Schneider in my head for a second. I was thinking, Rich Schneider was a genius. He was great. He had like a nervous breakdown or something and stopped performing comedy for a long time. But he was a brilliant comic who would have gone so far had he not had that nervous breakdown. He was brilliant. He is Canyon Man. I drive an SUV through the canyon. Canyon Man. Brilliant comedian.
Nice. Rob Schneider. This is not really a controversial take, but Rob Schneider, never really that funny.
There's one joke of his that I liked. I think I may have said it on the show before. When he was talking about daylight savings time, he was talking about how his mom, whenever she leaves a voicemail, she's like, "This is your mother." Like, I don't know her voice. I've known her my whole life. And she'll call and leave messages that only she would leave, like, "Hey Rob, it's don't forget it's daylight savings time. Don't forget to set your clock back. This is Mom." Like, who else is going to call me? I'm going to get a phone message and be like, "Rob, it's Mr. Bauman, your 8th grade gym teacher. Set your clock back." Like the one joke of his that I heard like in the 90s and I still love. I love that one joke of his, and for the rest, he's useless.
Yeah.
But that was a good joke. Mr. Bauman, your 8th grade gym teacher.
Yeah. Are you guys both okay with us kind of starting to wrap things up? Because I got to pack.
Yeah, you got to pack. I got to go take my mom's trash to the curb. It's Monday.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So, any last thoughts before we start the outro stuff?
Now, I did want to say that I did take Leah to Leah hadn't seen a gynecologist yet because usually you don't go until you start having sex. But she was having some issues with her period, and so I took her to my gynecology appointment just so she could see what it entailed, and then we made an appointment for her. So that's how close we are, and that's how truthful I am. Like she stood at my head when I had my pelvic exam. She wasn't like down there watching, but still, she got the gist of what happens during a gynecologist appointment. So like, I just think everybody should be just completely brutally honest, and and at the appropriate ages, but still be completely honest with their kids. So that's my bottom line as far as sex talks go.
I would love to go to a gynecology appointment.
Didn't you during OBGYN appointments?
Not. I wouldn't. I mean, they did the wand, but there was like a I guess you're right. I will say when Sarah was.
You didn't help. We had a weird doctor, huh?
When Sarah was I don't know if she was in labor yet or they were inducing for Logan. There was one doctor who was fairly young. I think she was like a resident, and she just didn't have like she was not gentle. And Sarah, every time she'd come in, Sarah would be like, "It feels like she's fisting me," and I'm like, "I'm counting this as a threesome. This is probably the closest it's gonna get, and I'm counting it because I'm standing here while she fists you, so that counts."
And I'm masturbating, so it's
yeah.
So I have one thing to say. If you listen to our last week's episode or watched the video or watched the live stream an hour ago, I said that I gave the reasons why I wanted to have Madhavi on for that week and why we wanted to talk about the topic we talked about, which was advocacy and activism. And there's also a special reason we had this topic, and it's because one of our favorite regular listeners, Ricochet Rita on the YouTubes, Sam was the
Overthinker.
Sam the Overthinker on the TikToks. She reached out and said, "Hey, my kids are reaching the age where I'm starting to have these talks. I'm curious, what did you and Michael do? When do you have those talks? What kind of talks do you have?"
Michael?
Michael, Cole, not together, but independently with our kids. We had our talks years ago. Michael's having his now, so she wanted us to share our stories and our perspectives. So if you have topic ideas, people, you too can be like Sam the Overthinker and get more information than you possibly want about fisting by asking us a question.
Yeah. And Matthew, now that you put that idea out there, I want you to come over and have the talk with Logan with me. I think that will make it even more awkward.
Oh, God.
You'll just be in the background doing that while I'm and sometimes we do things that aren't necessarily going to lead to a pregnancy. They're just for fun. And you'll be like,
fisting, Logan, we're talking about fisting.
Every single fucking week. Nope. We hit 4 viewers. Leah joined right at the right time. I feel so bad for Leah. Like, she joins every time she watches the live stream. It is just the most horrendous shit.
Well, sometimes the vacuum.
Stop.
We'll set going on.
You disgusting. All right.
So if you're watching the live stream right now and you like what you just heard, there's only 2 ways to hear stories like that. A is in the live stream. And we don't usually live stream for free. Usually you have to be a subscriber to get the live stream.
Yeah.
So right now, if you want to watch these YouTube videos, go ahead, subscribe to this channel, like this video, make comments below about how horrified you are now and how much you are permanently damaged by what you saw. Ring the notification bell so you can be damaged again in the future. But if you want to be able to consistently know about the things that I talk about that are only available live and at the $10 version, you need to go to patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. Take it away, Mike.
And if you're listening to us and you're not watching on YouTube, give us 5 stars or a thumbs up or whatever your
fist up
app. Yeah, fist up at your app of choice. Apparently, the fist plus the flag emoji plus the Tesla emoji equals "Yay America."
Yay America! We killed a building full of people.
I saw the flame emoji referred to as the Tesla emoji today, and that's all I'm referring to it as.
That was Michael Che.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So if you give us good reviews, whatever it is on the
your podcast
app of choice, or if you want to contribute to our financial well-being, and keep in mind that some of us on this podcast are not employed. You can do so at patreon.com/talking about the big stuff.
That's what I said earlier. I said patreon.com/talking about the big stuff.
Right. And that's really important that you remember. It's patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. And that is where you can get 4 different tiers. There's the free tier, which is the same as everybody else, but it's on Patreon. There's the $1 tier, which is 4 days early. The $3 tier, which is a little bit of extra spice. And then the $10 tier, which is where you get to see and hear all the terrible things that Matthew does and says. And I contributed this week for once.
Every time you hear on the other versions, Michael say, anyway, you missed something really filthy.
Yes, yeah. And sometimes there's one thing that made it to this episode that I might cut because...
I didn't say it. It was a paraphrase. They wouldn't even know where it came from.
Well, it's going on the $30 version. Anyway, thank you, Madhavi, for being on both episodes. And Matthew, you got any last thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to say, everyone who made it this far, thank you for joining us and about talking about the big stuff. And when you talk to your children, you don't have to refer to yourself as the big stuff.
Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. It's just the beginning. If you have thoughts or questions or topics you'd like us to tackle in a future episode, Drop us a line on our social media channels. Engage with this video when you are now watching it as a VOD on YouTube. Send us an email. We love hearing from our listeners, bringing us topics, because if you leave it up to the three of us, we're going to eventually be talking about underwater basket weaving. So we would appreciate you guys reaching out a little bit. Don't forget to subscribe to Talking About the Big Stuff on your favorite platform. Give us a 5-star rating. Engage with it. Criticize us. We need to grow and be better, and you're going to help us be there. You're going to help us get to that point. It really helps us more to reach out and also to keep the conversation going. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more big ideas and more thought-provoking discussions. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep talking about the big stuff.
The preceding podcast has been a Chocolate Diamond Media LLC production. Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.